show starts in 1 minute. Good evening, folks, and a hearty welcome to our drive-in theater. We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you, one that will provide several hours of pleasurable relaxation and diversion for you and your family.
Like 9 out of 10 film stars, Raquel Welch uses Lux Beauty Soap.
Well, no, I like to be a woman and a man to be a man, you know.
We hope you'll make this a weekly visit. You love the tasty array of snacks we have to offer. Bring your friends. There are always wonderful new pictures to see. We hope you have a wonderful time.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse, the NPR for the sensible centrist. I apologize. I'll just get this out of the way. I'll apologize for there not being an episode last week. It was a bit of an emergency. Now, I was a bit vague in the post I put out. It's nothing serious. Everyone is fine. It just was an unfortunate and untimely event, really. But we're back this week, and we are going to be looking into a book called Programmed to Kill by David McGowan. Now, you're the one, Ludwig Path, who put me onto this to begin with.
Yes,
what do you think about this book?
Witticism TV is the one who put me onto this, actually. So that's why I wanted to have him in here. I was thinking in 2022 that I was going to have an episode on this book that would be a sort of sequel to the kind of leftism and drugs episode. That was the Longhouse 7. But to be honest, I find the book is a little bit too dense. I think a little bit too scattered. And I'm not confident, honestly, in doing this book justice on this show. In a way that I feel like would represent it accurately, and because I feel like I'm treading on dangerous ground here, because it really does exist in a sort of world where you're threading a very fine line between making very hard accusations against institutions and so on, where there are certain facts that are in a certain circumstantial evidence in here, but there's also a lot of speculation. So, but witticism, you put me onto this book. So where did you hear about Programmed to Kill for the first time?
I heard about it on Twitter from kind of like a very niche conspiracy theory side of Twitter. I heard it from a guy, BTH_Bill on Twitter. And he had a whole thread of book reviews that he does. And Programmed to Kill was one of those books. So it was just like an overview of the book. And as I'm reading this overview, I'm just getting mind blown. And I was like, okay, I have to buy the book. So once I read it, I was just blown away. It was really like transformational, honestly. It's so crazy.
Yes, I agree. I mean, the experience of reading this book, it's quite disturbing, to be honest, on a psychological level. And I'm sort of split on it to the point where I'm now looking for these things a lot more when I'm reading the news and so on. But there's also a part of me that feels like the sort of the subject matter I'm afraid that it might just veer into kind of fan fiction land, in a sense that's very much tailored to people like you and me, like say like the people who watch the X-Files, for instance, or people who are more into like this type of what I would call like Dale Gribble type entertainment. You see what I mean?
Well, part of me
Dale
thinks
Gribble from King of the Hill. Was that the reference?
Yeah, that's the
Right.
that's the reference. Yeah.
Well, yes, and just to be clear for everyone listening here, I haven't read the book. So this was just sort of letting Path figuring out we should probably do an episode on this, and you witticism would be willing to do this, and I'm sort of here to come along for the ride. And now maybe I'll pick up the book after this, but I figured that if I ask stupid questions during the stream, then it's going to be, at least if nothing else, some entertainment value for the audience, or maybe I can help the audience understand.
Yeah,
what we're
I think
looking
so,
at as
but
well.
I think we interrupted Witticism TV. So
sorry.
Yeah.
Oh well, I was just gonna say, it almost is entertainment, except when you like actually look into this stuff. And I know that's always what every conspiracy theorist says, once you got to look into it, man. But if you really do check out this stuff, it's what's in the book. It is 100% real and verifiable. And as I was reading the book, I was just blown away. I mean, I had to take breaks. Like I'd read the book, I'd read a chapter, and I'd have to I don't smoke, but it made me want a cigarette. Like you have to walk around the block and think about your life for a little bit.
You need a break for a moment, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. You cannot sit and read it in one read, both because of the content and I think a little bit because of the way it's written, because it's very I don't, in my view, like it's not it's kind of detailed criticism, but it's a bit scatterbrained in a sense. It jumps very quickly from one topic to another topic to another topic, and it's not organized in a sort of let's just say if I had written a book like this, it would have been organized differently. So I think that Dave McGowan, rest in peace, he would have he thinks a little bit differently than me. There's something intrinsic. Yeah,
you kind of have to go into the book knowing what he's talking about and kind of being on the same page and having a background in this stuff, which I didn't, and I don't think any of us here are into it as much as he was into it. And so I think the book reads kind of that way. It's just like it just hits you right in the face, and it jumps around from thing to thing to thing to thing. So yeah, I agree. It is kind of scatterbrained.
But can you bring up the presentation so we can just start?
Is it because he's sort of writing from a sort of like inside baseball perspective, like he's using industry lingo and perspectives, or what is the background for this guy? Maybe you have a slide for that, Letting Path.
Well, yeah, we have the cover here, so you can already see what you're in for in this type of book. It's not some sort of happy clappy literature. It's quite heavy stuff. And I mean, yeah, the reason that it's hard is because it's so sort of there's so many references to things that you would only know about. Let's say if you're a sort of a conspiracy buff, or especially if you're an American conspiracy buff. That's why I talked about like the Dale Gribble audience, because let's say let's say if you're a total normie, like there's just no way that you can even process the stuff that's in here, because you don't have the any of the references for what's going on for like a single thing. You're just going to, I think their brain is just going to slide away, and they're going to lose focus. But let's say, okay, if you're a Joe Rogan listener, then maybe you know what MK Ultra is, and you're familiar with certain conspiracies because you've watched the Tim Dillon, that guy he has on talking about conspiracies and so on, a little bit more qualified. And maybe if you've watched X-Files, you're a little bit more qualified. And if you're interested in like this kind of serial killer lore, that's another thing that would help you understand this, because I know that that's a sort of big fan thing as well in the United States. That's another thing that's a bit sort of dangerous about this book, that it's a little bit too easy to get into like this sort of fan mode of consuming it, in a sense, instead of actually trying to take the premise seriously. I don't know what you think, Witticism.
Well, it's like true crime here in the US, but with this added layer of the intelligence communities kind of guiding and shaping how these events go. So all this true crime that everybody's I can't even think, ingesting, it's not just random events. It's very guided and sculpted, and there's these crazy coincidences. And, maybe if there's one or two weird things with just a couple serial killers, well, that's one thing. But, if you look on the title there, each one of those names on the left and the right side of the book are serial killers. And he goes through every single one of those. And each one has ties to the CIA, and each one has ties to, well, I shouldn't say each one, but a lot of them have ties to satanic cults. And they have very traumatic upbringings. And, they're often connected and multiple to
So he's
multiple
weaving.
people that they never get caught. These other people never get caught. They're kind of like patsies. So if it was one or two people, well, then it would kind of fit into the true crime category of books. But since it has this added layer above it of sort of a grand conspiracy above, I think it's different in that way.
So, I mean, since we've said so much already, I think we might as well, for the listeners who have not read the book, try to just explain what the premise is, because it's very difficult to even understand. Like, if you haven't had the premise explained to you in the beginning, then just looking at these sort of evidence, you don't really know how to connect them mentally. So, I mean, the author's premise that he puts forward is really that what you consider like the sort of standard profile of the serial killer, whether it would be someone like a Ted Bundy, for instance, or a John Wayne Gacy, or like these the typical American serial killer with a traumatic past who has some kind of like niche weapon. He has a niche hobby, a certain type of victim that he wants to hurt, and so on. This is actually, in most cases, CIA or FBI intelligence assets that are sort of operating more on some level as this quote unquote Manchurian candidates. If you're for those of you who are familiar with the film, the idea that you can they've been subjected to some level of indoctrination or brainwashing from intelligence agencies to be assets that can be either used for cleanup jobs for these alphabet agencies, or they're used to as sort of patsies, as you say, as fall guys to take the fall for other things.
That's a normie here, bringing up the Manchurian candidate to most people would seem kind of far-fetched. When you say indoctrinated, what level of control are we really talking about here?
Well, usually
go into any detail about that?
That's sort of the problem, is that it's not going to be able to sit and just step you through every step of the way for how these people have been indoctrinated. They will just point out the fact that this let's say like this person who has been presented as like a lone wolf serial killer, for instance. No, well, actually, they had connections to the CIA. Actually, they knew other serial killers. They don't actually
or
fit
they
the profile.
perform murders that would be unable to do really if you were just one person.
Exactly, and
right.
I mean, Ted Kaczynski is very popular in these circles. I mean, even he was subjected to this sort of like MK Ultra brainwashing, and and this is something that I mean, it's not formalized, but there's been many of these classified documents that have leaked later and so on, that sort of reveals how extensive this program was. And I think very much in the 1960s and the 1970s, the idea of mind control and the idea of like telekinesis, that was sort of like the next big thing coming up. It was either that or it was going to be computer tech, which took more over in the 80s and became the kind of the big thing. But at that time, it was sort of espionage, intelligence, and the idea of experimenting with what you can do to control people mentally, to get sort of to have these sort of controllable drones that you can use in intelligence. And that's where some of the experimentation with psychedelic drugs come in, and so on. So, I mean, if you're listening to Joe Rogan, they of course talk about like, oh, you hear that story about the MK Ultra where they got that guy on LSD and he had sex with a prostitute, like, but there's a lot of stuff that's going on that's much darker in the MK Ultra program, where they've been using people who have been in mental asylums and prisons and so on, who have sort of proclivities for violence, and trying to train them in a sense for murder. And what the author suggests is that the profile of a lot of these serial killers matches a lot better with the hypothesis that these people have actually on some level been trained to do this, to either be a fall guy or to be a cleanup guy in some kind of grander intelligence scheme.
Yeah, because that's the thing I was thinking, that making a fall guy seems a lot easier than making a cleanup guy if the guy you're making is a bit unstable.
Yeah, that is of course the problem. I mean, it is like the sort of standard critique that you can always put towards these things, is that of course it's not that easy to plan out these things perfectly. And I think that's part of the reason why some of these intelligence agencies have gone away from doing relying on on psychedelics, espionage, a lot of these techniques, and they've just gone over to just be computer nerds in a sense. Like it's all just like this
just
kind of
general
big data
information
now.
warfare, really.
I'm not saying that
they
they've
did a lot
stopped
of
doing
that
it,
stuff.
but
No, but they seem to have, that seems to have started a lot in like Vietnam and stuff, and they had a lot of success with that, and then sort of pivoted, I guess, to focusing more on that. Sorry, I don't want to derail it. Please continue.
Yeah, no problem. Is there something you want to add, Witticism?
Well, the mind control stuff, and really started in the 50s. It really got cranked up during that time. There's Operation Midnight Climax and Project Artichoke. These things, the Cold War really kicked off this desperate attempt by the CIA and to create sort of a Manchurian candidate. And as you say, they have sort of seemed to shift away from it. I don't know if like school shooters have taken its place, but it's kind of like Adam Lanza, he did the Sandy Hook shooting. Like he was a real nerd. Like he hacked into the government computers real early. And he was actually visited by his mom doesn't even know. His mom said, "Oh, I had a visit from very high up people." She didn't know if they were from the CIA or the FBI or what, but they came and visited her and they questioned him and everything. And they said, "Hey, your son is very smart. Who knows? He might even end up working for us one day." This is where the Kill Bill alarm bells are going off. People like, Timothy McVeigh, he was the same way. He was a huge nerd. He hacked, he had one of the very first computers when when you could first get them, he had them. And he immediately started hacking into government systems. And they got put on a list. You just know they got put on a list for doing that. And so I think, it definitely went away from, we're going to, inject these people with LSD and make them hear voices and make them crazy, to maybe more subtler means with the internet.
Yeah, definitely. And Timothy McVeigh, was he the Oklahoma bomber?
Yes, he was yes.
Yeah, just so I'm not mixing them up. That's why I really need to have you here, because there are so many of these names that I just end up getting them mixed in with each other, and I don't have like the same frame of reference or the same kind of knobs to hang these things on.
True. Well, you said you needed an American for the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is true, because other countries don't have the CIA and the FBI, and we're not all subjected to this as much as we are here.
But of course,
exactly,
this book does entail certain things that have happened in Europe that does,
True.
And the book is not written in the way where he will just present, okay, here's exactly how this happened. He will just say that, okay, it's possible that this could have happened because there have been other cases in various places where something similar have happened. So you can't discount the possibility of this. Let's say, I mean, one of the things that that he mentions there is it is a sort of article, something that happened, I think, in 1975, where there was a sort of NATO meeting in Norway, where you have I think it was some guy was stationed in Italy, Lieutenant Commander Thomas Norut, who basically said to an assembly of 120 psychologists that we have trained killers, basically, that we can control, and I mean, this is so hard to find this on the internet now. It was, you have to put in very specific search terms into Google to find it, and you just get like Naruto stuff because his name is similar to it. But you can get some archive files where the Navy has to go out and deny, all of these institutions have to go out and just basically do damage control because he said this thing. And a lot of the people who's mentioned in the book as well, it's like it's very hard to find anything on them on the internet, even though they are they've been sort of high up and they've been quite irrelevant in institutions and so on. It's like you try to Google them, you just get some sort of Wikipedia article where it's like, okay, well, this thing has been debunked, move on, please. Nothing to see here. I don't know if you had the same experience with witticism, but trying to Google some of these things, it seems to just be getting harder and harder to find anything on certain individuals.
Well, this is why McGowan is a treasure, a national treasure, because the work he's done here in all of his journalism is really priceless. And, there's 4 or 5 people, you can count on one hand the amount of people who are doing this kind of serious work to actually uncover, and actually do the work that they're supposed to do. I mean, if we had a media that actually worked, we would know about this stuff a lot more, but they're completely uninterested or controlled, or however you want to say it. But yeah, that's why this book is so important, along with, Aberrations in the Heartland of the Real by Wendy S. Painting. It provides you stuff that you're never going to get on Google. And so, yes, well, it's hard to convince a normie through any of Google. Going to go to the Wikipedia page and it's going to say, well, that McMartin preschool thing, that was really, that was just a big scam. Everyone involved in it was crazy. Whereas if you read the book, Program to Kill, or other books on it, you're going to find out that now this stuff really did happen. And so I think as Google gets more and more worthless, these books become more and more priceless.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I tried to look up, say, somebody like what's his name, Michelangelo Aquino, who is mentioned in the first part of the book, the pedocracy. Who and like this guy was an American lieutenant colonel in the military intelligence officer. He was like a high-ranking political scientist. He was in Vietnam. He was like the founder of the Temple of Set. That's like this offshoot from Anthony LaVey's Temple of Satan and so on. Like, he just has so many footprints, but he does not even have a Wikipedia article that describes anything about him, which is just it's quite peculiar. You can just find the pictures of the guy, which, I mean, in the next slide I have some photos of him, but it's really strange how some of these individuals that show up in this book, they just have like no information on them on the internet at all.
Yeah, this guy's starting his own, branch of Satanism, and there's nothing on him. He's just completely been wiped out. It's kind of how like that journalist Taylor Lorenz, she's kind of strange in that way. There's like hardly any information on her.
She sort of just came out of nowhere.
Yes, just came out of nowhere, makes big sweeping
money.
Yeah.
But okay, maybe you if you flip the slide, we can start looking at some of the parts of this book, because I mean it's way too much to cover in just one in one video. I mean, if you search Program to Kill on YouTube, you're going to find these video series with these kind of like playlists where they'll go into a lot of the individual serial killers and so on. And even if you're looking at that, it's very hard to draw hard conclusions from it. It's just sort of a kind of list of inconvenient truths in a sense. There's sort of circumstantial evidence about these people, or about how they're kind of the way that the mainstream has presented their cases. It's not completely coherent, but
before we go on here, can I just highlight 2 super chats here from Falling Outside the Normal Moral Constraints, or do you want to finish?
Yep. No, go right ahead.
Well, first, for $2, he says, glad to hear the medical thing was nothing serious. Yeah, as I said, I wanted to keep the details out of it, which sort of makes it sound worse than it was, and I'm sorry for that. But thank you. Happy to see Witticism back on the show. Well, we're happy to have him. You have some fans here, Witticism. That's good. Okay, keep going.
To be back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just following up on like what we were talking about on the previous slide, the guy that I was talking about, Michael Aquino, he's the one who's photographed on the right there. And I mean, it looks like there's something wrong with the photo here. It seems to have like a bad hair day or something. Maybe he just took his helmet off. No, this is actually how he presents
devil
himself.
Horn eyebrows are part of his image.
He has like gelled up devil horn eyebrows in every photo that's taken of him. And this is like a high-ranking military officer in the United States Army. It's a little bit sus in my view. It's just like I I don't know how I would even process this. I mean, I've always considered like Americans to be very formal. They don't even have beards. They everybody's just shaving and keeping it super clean. And if you have like your beard is too weird looking, if your mustache is too weird looking, you can't be taken seriously. But this guy is apparently high ranking, and he can just walk around looking like this. So I mean, the first part of the book it's called like the pedophocracy. It's just sort of a play on words. It just means like ruled by pedophiles, which, of course, with the Epstein scandal breaking, this has become a lot more of a sort of an accepted idea. And this book was released in 2004, so the Epstein stuff was not mainstream, and it's not mentioned, as far as I know, in the book. Witticism can correct me if it ever comes up, but I think if it was more publicized, it would have definitely been in there. But he uses a couple of other examples of where you're seeing like high degree of involvement in sort of pedophile circles within elites in society. The first that he brings up is Marc Dutroux. That is the man sketched on the left. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him from before.
No, I'm not.
I had never heard about him until the book.
So this is basically, I mean, I heard somebody say that like Belgium is famous for two things. It's like waffles and pedophilia. And I mean, he is basically the pedophilia part. I think there's a documentary series on YouTube that's called like The Monster of Belgium or something like that. That's about Marc Dutroux, which I really recommend people watch. I mean, it's of course, if you have the stomach for it. I mean, to contrast with, I'm just going to use Epstein as a sort of launch board to try to explain Marc Dutroux without going into too many details, because Epstein compared to Marc Dutroux is actually very soft. There's something like very kind of luxurious, high end and jet set about Epstein, where on some sense, even though the stuff that he was doing was horrible, you can sort of see how he could have enticed some of these women to join in on these airplanes out of their own volition. Basically,
it's
saying
something
that,
a little bit eyes wide shut about the whole thing, right?
Yes, and saying that, oh well, you're very good looking, and we need more masseuses, and you're going to be on an airplane, and you're going to have conversations with the top politicians, top lawyers, top judges, people who are in the top of the private sector, and so on. And I can see that, especially for young naive women, this could have been a very attractive proposition, and it's something that on some level they could
Probably
have at least
career move for some of them.
Some part of them would have sort of enjoyed what they were doing, even though I'm not trying to victim blame or anything, but just as a contrast, because with Marc Dutroux, this is like he's like the kind of grimy basement white knuckle version of Jeffrey Epstein, where he I mean, he had, like most of the people who end up like this, he had like a very troubled background with abuse and so on. He was trained and educated as an electrician. He owned, I think, at least 4 properties in Belgium, and he basically had designed these sort of special dungeon basements to keep women there as sex slaves, and he would just go and kidnap young women, keep them there as sex slaves, and just have like a sort of pedophile circle that would just go to these apartments and abuse women, basically. And of course, that sounds like a straightforward enough case. The reason that it became a big thing is that he was put in prison, then he was let out, and then he was put in prison, and then he was let out again. And there were so many attempts to try to put this guy away for a long time, and so many people knew what was going on, but apparently he was so connected in the Belgian system with high-ranking officials, politicians, lawyers, and so on, that even the police would sort of just like, they would go to the locations, and it was reported that they would actually hear people hammering on the wall, like trying to call for help, and they would just leave the premises again. So it was like he was just so deeply connected to all of the elites in Belgium.
I'm gonna bite here. How is like a random electrician connected to all of these people? I mean, how is he connected in a way that gives him that much power?
Well, the way that I understand it is that he started as more of a small-time crook, in a sense. Like he would, I think he would sort of frequent a lot of these underworld circles, and he would do work for these people. And then I mean, it's a little bit foggy for me. I don't remember the specific details around it. It's been a while since I watched the documentary, but
Okay, so we had some money to
it started as, I think, he's just doing smaller favors for people, and then it grew into like a bigger thing. And it's clear that there was a lot more people who were involved in this than he was, but he was sort of more of a, you know, the guy who was actually going to take the fall for it.
Custodian of the whole thing here.
So,
okay. Almost with the first rim shot of the evening here. What does a Belgian hold during sex? A school bag.
Okay. But I mean, this got so serious that basically there was this is like a national public strike in Belgium because of this guy, where everybody just stopped going to work, like bus drivers, chefs, you know, public officials, like people who were doing the sort of maintenance work. They would just refuse to go to work until like the courts and the police would actually go further in the prosecution of this case. So I mean, it's quite a fascinating thing to read about if that's something you want to look into. I mean, he actually has a Wikipedia page that's not just, you know, classified, debunked. I mean, you know, it is an actual thing that you can read upon on the internet. You don't really need all of these alternate books and you know, all of these, you know, esoteric niche authors to find information on it. But I mean, maybe if you want to dig a little bit deeper, you might have to, but at least for the guy himself. So that's the sort of first thing that he brings up as sort of an example that there are pedophiles that are very high ranking in society, and that this is a sort of means of control and also a sort of motivation for what's actually going on. And I mean, it comes in later in terms of, you know, why do you need cleanup guys, for instance? Why do you need people to take the fall? Because there are people kind of much higher up that need protection for a lot of the stuff they're doing. I don't know, Witticism, do you have any insights on Dutroux, something that I left out?
Just that his story mirrors Epstein's like crazy. I mean, he's like the prototypical Epstein, and yeah, he's totally connected in a much larger network. And you think, well, how is he allowed to operate? It's always the same thing you say with Epstein. How is he allowed to operate? And it's the same answer. It's because the people higher up were involved. And I think was he making like CP or stuff like that? I think he was involved in that. I think he went a little further than what we know about Epstein, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he went much further in terms of just like sheer levels of human trafficking and you know, inhumanity. I mean, with Epstein, it's a little bit clouded as to how far things went, but there's, at least I get the impression that there was a much higher degree of consent with the girls that he brought in, as opposed to the Dutroux case.
And Epstein, you know, there's like planes and an island, and seems kind of glamorous, you know, but Dutroux is like you're just down there in the basement being chained up,
kidnapped and thrown into a basement. Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah.
So another one of these kind of pedophile cases that's being brought up here is like the Franklin child prostitution ring case. That was the sort of thing that went on from like the 80s and into the 90s. And of course, if you Google it, you're just going to end up with this sort of standard, you know, this has been debunked. There was just like a big scam to make politicians look bad and so on. But there, let's say, I mean, the case was centered around a guy that's named Lawrence E. King Jr., who was running a sort of credit union in Omaha, Nebraska. And it said that he was sort of running a kind of like child prostitution ring where he was trying to just take children out of foster homes and ship them into these parties to be like sort of playthings for politicians. It's a bit similar to sort of the Pizzagate stuff. And what was going on there. But of course, if everything you could read about this case, it's like, okay, it's just been debunked. Everything was fake and so on. But
nothing to see here.
I mean, in spite of that, though, in spite of the fact that it's all just like debunked and you're stupid if you think so, there were a lot of people who came forward as abuse victims, including a guy named Paul Bonacci, who was apparently abused by Lawrence E. King for many years, and he actually sued Lawrence E. King in a sort of civil suit, and he actually he won the suit for like 10, I think it was like $1 million or something, because the way that the judge saw it, like Lawrence E. King wasn't able to actually answer for any of the complaints that came up. So I mean, in spite of the fact that it was all just apparently bullshit, a lot of these victims actually got huge payouts for, and it was not contested. He never even tried to repeal the case. So I think that should just be noted. I don't know if you have any inputs, witticism on the sort of childhood, the Franklin prostitution ring scandal.
Well, it's been completely, wiped from the, really public memory, and like if you just try to go look it up, it's just been
I tried to look it up right now,
clean.
and there's not even pictures of anything. It's just it's a tiny Wikipedia page that says this has been debunked, basically.
Yeah, well, it was part of like the larger, satanic panic of the 80s. And it was really, it's just these crazy Christians making up these crazy claims, and nothing really happened. So, yeah, guess we're done with that. And then they moved on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing that as well, the connections to the satanic panic angle, which is, I mean, it's funny. It seems like the term satanic panic is a sort of like co-op, sort of like psyop in itself, because I mean, at this time, especially going through like the 70s through the 80s, there were so many of these like spree killers who all seem to be connected to like these kind of satanic cults and so on, and it was all sort of going on at the same time. So it seems completely rational to me for there to be instilled some kind of fear in the public, in a sense, of people trying to do something about this. And everything has just been chalked back to, well, it was just some crazy Christians in the 1980s who were mad about Judas Priest or something, and so we can just laugh at them and move on, essentially.
I got a strike. Well, sorry, I got a strike on my channel because I had said that the system. I'm going to try to clean it up here, but the system will allow the news to be spread in a way that makes it seem crazy. Like they'll allow the truth to get out, but only through crazy channels. Like, was there actually satanic pedophiles doing this crazy stuff? Like, absolutely. But where was the outlet? It was the crazy Christians screaming about, Teletubbies and, the Smurfs and Cabbage Patch Dolls were satanic. So they were more than happy to allow that information to go out. And I had said, well, that's... Go ahead.
It's the Alex Jones is always eventually right phenomenon, right?
True, but why I got in trouble was I had said specifically, it reminded me of this verse in the Bible where this witch follows Jesus Christ. They're walking along the streets, and this crazy lady comes out, and she says, Jesus Christ is King. Jesus Christ is Lord. He's the Son of David. And all the disciples are like, would you shut up? Would you shut up? Like what she was saying was true, but the fact that she's crazy completely discredits the message. And that's what they do. They allow the truth to come out, but only through these weird outlets like the satanic.
It's one of those things that, why a lot of people jumped on, to take a recent example, the whole Kanye debacle, because like, oh, it's based Kanye, he's saying the things that a lot of us are saying, but when it's the deranged hip-hop artist yelling it on the Alex Jones show, like,
yes,
what threat does that actually pose? It's not actually going to accomplish anything.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yes, I mean, it is the hierarchies in society and the everlasting problem of credibility, in a sense, where the medium is the message on some level, and it's such a huge hurdle for people like us. Honestly, it's how can you find credible people to try to speak certain truths, and if they do, they end up just getting thrown shade at or being put in a sort of basket with the other crazies. So I don't know if I'm missing any of these kind of elite pedophile stories. I know that there's a lot more in the chapter, but I try to just pick out something that I thought was at least that struck interest with me.
Yeah.
One thing that this book brings up is that, what's convenient about these people is they have built-in deniability when crimes actually happen, because they go, well, this guy's crazy. I mean, look at him. He's obviously a loon. And so you can just discredit the whole upper narrative by just saying, well, Stephen Paddock, whatever, he was hearing voices in his head. And then that's the end of it. Even though the top layer narrative says, hey, these guys were creating the messages in his head. That's kind of the premise of the book.
Yes. I mean, I talked to you about this on Telegram, but the reason that I just got a kind of reminder to do this episode is because I'm watching through the X-Files now with my wife. And I think it's season 2. In episode 3, they have an episode that's kind of, it's called Blood, I think that's the title of the episode. And the premise is that there's this small town in America, there's like this rural farm town where people are starting to go crazy, and there's so many murders that are happening at the same time. And it's really sort of a combination of like the FBI kind of orchestrating, they're being put some kind of like fear toxin into the pesticides that they're using for their crops, and the fact that they're using electronics to sort of display these messages that people are reading all the time, and that's triggering a sort of fear response and making people kill each other. And of course, that's even making that association makes this a little bit less serious. But I think because of the nature of the subject matter, it's we have to keep it on a sort of entertainment level on some levels, right?
Yeah, it's almost easier to approach it with like that layer of abstraction.
Because I've said previously that I hate these kind of like fun conspiracy shows. Like in Norway, you have what's it called, like the Konspirasjonspodden. It's like this conspiracy entertainment thing where you're just going to sit and talk about all these wacky conspiracies, and they're all kind of equal. They're all presented as equally credible, and they all have to be debunked afterward, just for entertainment value in a sense. And it's all done in this kind of tongue-in-cheek, funny. But I absolutely hate this kind of stuff. But it does give you a little bit of deniability, especially when you're dealing with things like this that can be a little bit dicey. So yeah, maybe you want to just swap the slide again. We can look at the next part of the book.
For Nordan for a moment. I think he refers to the Kanye going on Alex Jones' show. He says it made good content, Walrus. Yeah. I mean, Alex Jones, he has to sell his water filters, right? That's what's important here. We gotta keep the content rolling.
Gold-backed securities.
Yeah.
What is that kind of formula
That's how we
that he sells?
save Western civilization. Come on now, guys. The Biden regime is failing. It's going up in flames. Have you seen how much hellfire Turley has on the Biden? I think you pointed it out in a tweet the other day.
I did
any
a tweet
day now. It's gonna happen, guys. Also, buy my masculine man juice supplements in the link below.
The hypervitamins. I don't remember what the name. It had a certain name. The supplement that Alex Jones sells, but
I don't remember.
I think we got the point across.
There's something about Henry.
Well, yeah, that's actually the title of part 2 in the book, right? And I mean, it starts with trying to examine the case of Henry Lee Lucas, which witticism you also asked me to watch the 4-part documentary series on Netflix on Henry Lee Lucas, the Confession Killer, which I was able to do in time at least. So yeah, I enjoyed it. It was really good, but it does cast a little bit doubt on some of the things that are in this book. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, Henry did kill 11 people, so he was a legit serial killer. But I think at the time, he confessed to over 600 murders. Well, that's a little much. And so that documentary goes through and says, well, it didn't quite play out like that. But the book, Program to Kill does point out the fact that he receives special treatment. And the documentary shows that as well. He was given milkshakes, if he confessed to a murder. And so there was this weird perverse incentive, and he kind of had the reins. And Texas at the prison, he had crazy permissions at the prison. And he's in the custody of the Texas Rangers, who you think, oh, well, this is the most badass squad of cops ever, and they don't take crap from anybody, and they're not going to let a prisoner boss them around. And yet Henry Lee Lucas knows the codes to secure doors in the prison and stuff like that. And he was scheduled to be executed. I mean, it's Texas. He's going to get killed for murdering people. And he is excommunicated, or not executed. His sentence was commuted. I think that's the way you say it.
Yeah, commuted.
He was pardoned.
Cancelled.
He was pardoned by George Bush, and then he went on to die of, congestive heart failure. He wasn't killed by the government, which is weird. That's just strange. He has very strange connections.
I mean, the pardoning is kind of strange, but not to cast doubt on everything here, but isn't it possible that sort of the bureaucracy at some point took over and someone realized that they could farm this guy for statistics, basically, if he kept confessing to murders? Like, if we just let him, treat him well, and he's going to keep confessing, and our numbers are going to go up.
Program
of solved cases.
Addresses that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess there are some things that might be inconsistencies between the documentary and the book, but there are other things that actually coincide with each other, like the idea that I mean, there were people in the Texas Rangers. You see that in the I don't remember his name, but one of these the top people in the Texas Rangers at the time, he was like a previous FBI guy, that they put in charge there. And you also had some of these top people who it was basically seemed to be very heavily implied that they were just feeding him information. I mean, for those of you who have not seen the documentary, I do recommend it. It's not there's no pause in the documentary. It's actually a kind of nice watch, in spite of it being on Netflix. But with this guy, it's sort of like this guy they brought in, and he was just going to be put on trial, I think, for killing his girlfriend. I think that's at least the three murders that he was confirmed for, like his girlfriend, his mother, and was somebody else that they were actually sure that he had killed. But he was starting to confess to these murders, and it went through because he seemingly knew a lot of specific information about every murder that had taken place. Where he would say that he knew what they were wearing, he knew where they were buried, he knew at what time it happened and what they'd been killed with, and so on. And if he hadn't done it, quote unquote, that there would be no way for him to actually know this. But at the time, there were many, at least some journalists and lawyers who noticed that there were discrepancies in his stories, and that it would not have been possible for him to have killed, the 600 people that he claimed to. I mean, he would have to have like quantum leaped between different states, to have actually have done it. And looking at the guy, this just seemed sort of implausible. He's not a very impressive person. He's a sort of, like you said, witticism. He's not a very smart guy. He's got an IQ in the 80s range. He seems to have, a missing eye, certain concussions, certain cognitive problems, and so on. So there, I mean, there's at least a lot of support, I think, in both the documentary and the book, that he was a sort of fall guy, in a sense. He was there to basically take the fall for other killers, and he was being fed information by people higher up in the system, and the people who tried to expose that were cracked down on very, very hard. Even though like certain DNA evidence came out later proving that it wasn't him. But I mean, at that time, it had just gone, so much time had passed. And like you said, his death sentence was canceled by George W. Bush, which it doesn't really happen, does it? I think maybe he canceled 3 death sentences in his entire career as governor of Texas. It was just not something that he was doing. He was just like stamping every single like retard who's killed their dog or something, for
that's a bit of a weird
penalty.
one.
And there are just like weird facts upon weird facts about this guy, where he was also in the mental asylum, right? So that's where the suspicion comes in, that they suspected that he was experimented on in the same way that these other people were with these sort of MK Ultra stuff, and that he was just in a sense kind of like programmed to be used as a certain as a tool. But of course, the predictability is not there. I think he is a bit too much of a loose cannon, to the point where he got away from the Texas Rangers for a little bit. He started saying completely different things than what they were feeding him. So,
Well, yeah. In Program to Kill, they talk about. Well, you had mentioned that guy gave a speech at that NATO conference. He admitted that they take convicted murderers from military prisons and use behavior modification techniques on them, and then spread them around the world. And so once that precedent is there, it's hard to look away from the fact that, Henry, he killed somebody and he went to prison. I don't know if he killed one or two people, but he went to prison and he was sentenced to 30 to 40 years. And he gets out in 10 years. And they ask him, like, are you going to kill again? Are you good to be out? And he goes, oh, yeah, I'm going to kill again. And they go, okay, well, here, go out and kill again. And so he's just released on the public. And then months later, he's just back at it. So it's kind of hard to look away from those things when you know that what goes on in these mental institutions and what goes on in these state prisons, they have done MK Ultra experiments on these people, fairly recently. It wasn't contained to just the 50s. And so Henry Lee Lucas is, a potential person. He's provided as a pretty good example of this in the book.
yeah, exactly. I mean, there's just so many like weird factoids about
So
him.
in the book, is it very detailed about sort of his release being with that for that purpose? Or is it more accident? I'm just trying to understand whether it's like a purposeful release, or if it's someone in the system not understanding the danger he poses. I mean, does this happen multiple times?
Well, it's always that question: is it malevolence or is it incompetence? And maybe
Exactly. I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, if it's one serial killer, fine. But like, it's so many. Like with, Charles Manson over there on the right, he's part of, this is all detailed in Chaos by Tom O'Neill. He has all these groupies that he's going, doing crime with, and he's controlling them, and he's using mind control techniques on them, which is weird.
Mhm.
And he gets a probation officer who lets him like just move to Mexico for a little bit. He's like, well, you're on parole, but yeah, go over there and do that. And
Just
then
do
it turns out
whatever.
in California at that time, the average parole officer had like 100 people that they were managing. But Charles Manson's parole officer just had Charles Manson, like literally just one parolee that he was in charge of. Well, that's kind of strange. And then it turns out, oh, well, that parole officer was actually part of a CIA program that was giving LSD and drugs to criminals to see their effects that they were having on them. So it just,
Yeah, so someone
everything
in
just
the system wanted to
compounds.
see what would happen if they just let this guy, do his thing,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
nothing
And that's
else,
kind of the
right?
same with Henry Lee Lucas. It's like they mess with their minds, they torture them. Henry Lee Lucas talks about being tortured in prison, and he's an idiot. I mean, he can't really explain these things very well, which is convenient for the people at the top and convenient for people like us who are saying these kinds of things. I get that. But yeah, it's just what Program to Kill really does well is it hammers these points home by, like you're saying, you have a little bit of doubt, but when you read the book, it's just example after example after example, and it just goes on and on and on. And it's a long book. I mean, it's pretty dense. So it's not just like, well, this one time, this one thing happened.
Yeah,
And
of course.
that's my whole worldview.
No, I just wanted to clarify that this is, there are connecting threads, and these things happen, on a regular basis, in a sense, throughout this book.
True.
Yes.
Well, like John Wayne Gacy, he has suspicious relationship with the police, and it's the same thing. Is it incompetence or is there actual stuff going on?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the book is like maybe about 400 pages, but the pages are very, long, and there's a lot on each page, and it's very it's very stacked.
It's small print.
No pictures, so you're gonna have to do a lot of reading, and that's part of the reason that it's a sort of difficult book to sort of compile into an easily
I'm gonna have to add it to my list. I'm still
presentation.
Still trying to battle my way through my copy of The Decline of the West, which is like this old the first of the two books that I got a hold of, and they're like old, like you can see it's almost like photo printed copies of the original text, because some of the pages are like slanted and smudgy. It's rough. And that's also a very stacked book. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail. Let's continue.
But one of the points that's being brought up in this book that's sort of a little bit outside of just giving like these different cases of things that are happening that are suspicious is the concept of like the trying to debunk the serial killer, right? And that's something that comes in the Henry Lee Lucas Netflix documentary. They bring in this kind of expert, right, from the FBI, who talks about, I've been doing profiling for 30 years, and as you can see here, it's not a consistent profile for Henry Lee Lucas that matches. And like, I mean, that guy is basically there to sell the idea that you have the standard, Hannibal, maybe not Hannibal, but like this kind of romanticized lone wolf killer who has like a signature weapon, who is like the standard, true crime Scooby-Doo type bad
sort
guy,
of like the quote-unquote modern serial killer. Yeah.
Yes, but Dave McGowan goes against this in this book and basically says that it's really not the case at all that these serial killers act like this. I mean, in so many of the cases, their victims are really not as consistent as it's being claimed. They have a much larger variety of victims in terms of demographic properties. They do not have some kind of like custom weapon that they always use, and in fact, this is it's a complete liability to have like some kind of signature weapon. It's extremely easy to get caught if you're doing it that way. What he explains is that the typical MO, quote unquote, for a serial killer is to either they just use whatever's in the environment, right? I mean, you find an environment, and whatever you can use, whether it's like a plastic bag, or it's like a 2x4 plank, or something sharp, like a ballpoint pen, or like anything, you use that. Or they will use like a 44 caliber or a 42 caliber handgun, which is really like the perfect weapon for murder in a sense, because there's so many. First of all, there's so many registered handguns of that type in the United States that is almost impossible to track. And the other thing is that it's I mean, the way that the gun is used, it's not like you're standing long range shooting. It's used in the same way that Anton Chigurh uses this sort of cattle pistol, in a sense, in No Country for Old Men, if you've seen that, where he just like puts the gun into the victim's head, and he just pulls it. And that's sort of how they typically use them, is that they will go all the way up close, and they will just point the gun at the head and shoot. And because the bullet is so small, it will sort of be lodged into the head and ricochet inside of the brain, usually killing the victim. And the another advantage of it is that the weapon is so quiet, because of it's a small size, and when they use it in close proximity to the victim, let's say if you're like in like a big city environment, then it's very unlikely that you can even hear something like that going off. If you have construction going on in the background, or it's busy streets with cars going by, it's really hard to even detect. And so I think that these are some points to notice. Even the idea that they're always acting alone, it's quite a suspicious idea, because you're seeing here that in many of the cases, these people are like they're acting together with other people. They're related to, like, they sort of know each other in very suspicious ways. They're connected to organizations and so on. They know things that they're not supposed to know. So I don't know, witticism, am I missing any points?
No, you're doing great. I think like people like John Wayne Gacy, you know, when he got arrested, he said, "Well, you're gonna have to bring in the others because there's more people than just me." And you know, David Berkowitz there in the middle. There's a great documentary on Netflix called Sons of Sam, which was done on the. It was based on a book by Maury Terry called The Ultimate Evil. And Maury Terry did all this great investigative work where he really showed that David Berkowitz was part of this larger satanic cult and was doing all these murders as part of a, I don't know, part of a larger scheme. I mean, they were definitely videotaping the murders and selling them as snuff films. You know, Henry Lee Lucas had a partner there. You can see him in the picture. His name is O'Toole. Who again
I think
was
it's
part of
Otis Toole. I just like this picture because it looks like the guys from Dumb and Dumber, like
yeah.
when they're there. So I mean, these guys would go on like road trips together. I just thought it was slightly amusing. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, well, like, you know, I guess his name's what is it? Otis Toole.
Yes.
Anyways, you know, he grew up in a satanic cult and had horrific, you know, childhood of sexual abuse by his own family members, and you know, they started he's bisexual, and he's had this very strange, lovey relationship with Henry Lee Lucas, which is kind of bizarre. And so, yeah, the you know, if you're going to watch Mind Hunters on Netflix, it's going to portray this, you know, very cold, calculated FBI knows it all, and they've come up with this iron tight, you know, profile for the serial killer, and they'll bring up people like Ed Kemper and people like that. But in reality, it's not quite so cut and dry. I mean, you have like Richard Ramirez up there on the top right. I mean, that you can't paint a profile on him. I mean, oh, he's doing all these crazy killings and all this stuff, and then, you know, then he goes and he kills and he rapes like a 80-year-old woman. Well, that's not going to be part of the profile. No one could predict that. So while they try to make it seem, I don't know. I don't know why they create these profiles. If it's just to calm the public or to be on the lookout or whatever, but it definitely is not very accurate.
I think especially with Richard Ramirez, like he had a very great diversity of victims, and he was also, I don't know how many things he was connected to, but he was doing LSD. He believed he was, you know, talking to Satan, you know, telling him to do this stuff. I mean, it's you know, that sort of seems to be like the common thing here, is that they're all connected to some kind of like cult on some level, which I mean, again, it's like, yo, satanic panic stuff, but I mean, you're kind of allowed to be panicked if it's real, if like they're all coming out and saying that they're, you know, they're killing people and they're saying I'm doing this because of the devil, or you know, I think you're not unreasonable for being concerned about this. Let's see, I don't know if there are any kind of like serial killer cases that we missed here. You have like the BTK killer, that there's a lot of interesting, you know, information on him as well in terms of the victims. I mean, I was watching something on YouTube earlier today where they were talking about like him doing in certain victims that were from, you know, that were not like random people, like people like from military families and so on, who were like actually quite prepared for combat, which he seems to, and he was still able to dispatch them. Have you read anything similar?
Well, BTK is kind of an interesting case. I'm from Kansas, and he was in Kansas, and I was alive when he got caught. It was I was here, but yeah, the panic around him was pretty real. I mean, when he came out, he got arrested because he started talking to the news. He was sending letters and stuff, and suggesting that he might go out and kill again. And yeah, it was really terrifying, you think. And I remember the panic. So like that, it adds credence to the book that there is a point to this. I mean, you'd think, well, why would the CIA want to, instill panic in its own population? But if you're having to ask questions like that, you're a little far behind. You got to catch up.
Yeah,
well,
so
I mean, I think for the purpose of the the book or the conversation here for anyone listening, I mean, taking a moment to say, okay, but why would the government, the CIA, whoever, like, where does the political gain from this come from? Does the book say anything about that? I know you just said if you think that you're a bit behind, but I think it's nice to just be thorough.
no, I
Well-
mean, he will typically use more examples, like say, like the Phoenix program that they used in that went on in Vietnam. In a sense, they will they basically have a sort of constant incentive to keep the public disorganized through it. But I don't know if he goes into like some specific kind of like, okay, this is the plan that they have. They want to accomplish this specific goal and so on. But maybe I'm overlooking something.
It just
Sorry,
the picture being painted here strikes me as a bit more of experimentation than a purposeful directed plan. That's all I'm saying.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail it with the BTK stuff. I just was talking from experience. I just remember that everybody was terrified when he came back out, and I think that's part of the benefits of this. But I'm not saying it's the whole thing.
Certainly.
So.
No, I agree. Like, I mean, obviously, a fearful population is easier to control. I get that. I just didn't know if the book had any specific sort of strategies in it.
As far as I know, it doesn't go into sort of specifics as to exactly in detail why this would have been done, other than the fact that this is a kind of a military strategy that's been employed, where you sort of keep people being afraid, and that stops people from being organized. And there's of course this sort of experimental angle as well, where there's a lot of that going on in these intelligence agencies. So I mean, like you said, there are a lot of critical questions that you can ask that the book will not answer. It will just sort of present here's like this there's like this long list of circumstantial evidence and things that doesn't fit with the mainstream profile of what's going on here. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to present this more as this kind of like quote unquote conspiracy entertainment TV, in a sense, because I can't like 100% stand behind it and answer every critical question. It's just, okay, we're just here asking questions. We're just looking at some of these things, and isn't that interesting, and isn't that interesting, and so on.
Right. No, it's definitely interesting. I'm gonna have to read this book after this. Paul Moosefoot highlights that assassination may be one avenue. Is that something the book talks about, like eliminating political enemies through crises, basically?
I don't think the book does talk about that, does it, Ludwig?
No, I don't remember in particular, because there was a while since I read it, and I try to just go through certain parts that I found the most interesting. But I don't think it talks about like JFK or stuff like that, even though, I mean, if you're within that sphere, that's kind of the typical thing people talk about, like JFK, Lee Harvey Oswald being a kind of candidate for the MK Ultra assassination program, right? Which, I mean, I'm not sure about that myself either. It's not... or
even like Jack Ruby. I mean, he gets arrested, and then he's immediately visited by MK Ultra scientist Jolly West. Well, that's, again, alarm bells are going off, and it just doesn't seem right. It's just too many coincidences, and that's always what this kind of this is why it's hard to present this book in a cohesive way, because it is so comprehensive and it's so scatterbrained and it goes all over the place. This book is like one big rabbit hole. I mean, you could pick any person that he talks about and just go down the rabbit hole for 3 hours, or watch a Netflix documentary on it. I mean, he's talking about just crazy things, which, there's not going to be, it's hard to say, well, this is, I'm trying to think what I'm trying to say, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's hard to present.
I understand where you're heading. It's a bit
facts.
of a kaleidoscopic sort of combination of things that don't match up with the story we've been told, basically.
Yes, there's always the official narrative, and at the time, these narratives worked and people believed in them. But the more that we file freedom of information requests, the more we learn, the more time goes on, these narratives just fall apart. And so there's never going to be a complete narrative. I mean, you can never say for sure what exactly happened, but we know enough to poke total holes in the official narrative. That's kind of what this book does.
Yeah, and that's fair. I don't expect the book to have all the answers. I'm just trying to see if it had any of those answers.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that it's not something that I can sort of present as like this critical case, or that we can go to take people to court, based on this and this and that, and we can abolish the CIA or anything like that. But it's really is a collection of very kind of sus information about certain events that you were probably not aware of, and it's something to have in mind. So I don't really have any more like serial killer stories. I think we might want to wrap it up in terms of like a kind of summary about like where do we go from here? Like what do you even make of something like this? We've been touching on the topic already, but I'm not so sure. It's very easy for this to just become like a genre of entertainment, where you're just sitting and talking like you're on the Joe Rogan show, and look at this, isn't this crazy? Look at this coincidence, and this guy knew that guy, and like you have encyclopedic knowledge of every serial killer and so on. But I don't know ultimately how useful it is outside of just getting the having that angle in your head that there are various ways for intelligence agencies to operate, and like you might be psyoped in very creative ways that you're not aware of.
Yeah, and I will say that the battlefield seems to have shifted a bit in the current year. I think without getting this channel demonetized and removed from YouTube, I think a lot of people have questions about events that happened roughly 3 years ago in the United States, and the government's involvement in that. But I think that it's easier today with the internet being the way it is. Let's hope it stays that way. It might be easier to see through some of it, but the question is, like, how do you do anything about it, really? Like you as an individual, right?
Well, yeah, no, it's very difficult. I mean, we can try to spread the word, quote unquote, and reach out to people, have the discussions.
Yeah,
and
but
so
are you
on,
going to
but...
convince the normies that the
Well,
robbing of the
it's not just
Nancy
going to be...
Pelosi's phone was a psyop, right?
Well, I mean, it's not all about the normies, but there are certain people that we want to reach, right? That are maybe higher functioning, who could be part of cooperation efforts,
Certainly, yeah,
and so on. But the problem I see now is that they seem to have solved, the elites have solved this internet problem by a certain ghettoification. In a sense, they've tried this kind of hard censorship for a while, and now they've seemed to have succeeded in a much more this kind of like ghetto approach that even Elon Musk seems to be facilitating currently.
yeah.
I see you've been complaining about that as well, witticism on Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter's
The new algorithm sucks.
I hate it so much.
Yeah, it's I don't know what it is. It's something they've done something with like how tweets are propagated based on like likes and retweets, and some tweets I post get like a lot of views but no interactions at all, and other tweets just go like way beyond expectation. Not that I have that many followers or anything, but it's just very inconsistent now. Like I genuinely don't know if the things I tweet are going to reach the people who follow me, right?
Yeah, some things I'll post, I get like 40 views, and then other things I post, like I was talking about the Steven Crowder and Daily Wire drama, and that got pushed to like 7,000 people. Like, it's crazy. It's weird how it'll put the magnifying glass on certain things now, and other things you just don't see, which is annoying.
Very, very.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed this as well, that there's certain accounts that I follow that they don't show up. They just do not show up on the feed at all. And there are things that I'm not following that are just, they keep showing up there. I'm not even interested in.
Yeah,
And
I talked about this with John D the other day. I think in one of his spaces, and it's after the update or whatever happened, my feed is just full of Jay Burden posting movie Bob quotes and like random back and forths between academic agent and people who comment on his posts. I don't know if that's like my personal algo, because I don't necessarily engage in that comment section very much. Like sometimes if he posts something, I'll reply to it if I feel like it's, if my mind snags on something. But I'm seeing so much like random uninteresting content, I suppose. and I know it's gay to to complain about oh, the content in my online Hugbox feed is bad. But is it too much to ask to just see the things that the people I follow post, and not like 7 tweets deep conversations?
I have a lot of the same things, so I can reciprocate that feeling. I also see the academic agent conversations and some of these Jay
Okay,
Burton
good. So
groups.
it's not just me. Yeah.
No, but yeah, there is a sort of, I can only explain it as a sort of ghettoification. You're seeing it across many of these social media platforms, that they find certain ways to just kind of close off content that they don't want people to reach people, and other content they want to reach. And of course, if you've been on YouTube, you've noticed this for a long time. But it just seems to be getting it seems to be getting worse. It seems to be getting harder and harder to
Yeah.
like, if you have some new ideas and you want to reach people with, it's just not. It's not happening unless it goes through like the proper filters, and it becomes more and more incomprehensible to understand what's going on in this algorithm.
Can
Yeah.
I add something here to the conclusion?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Let's do the let's do the full panel of complaining about Twitter. Go ahead.
Well, the conclusion of the book here, I found out about the book through a bunch of lefties on Twitter. The people I talked about, they're not on the right, and I think people on the right are sometimes, they're definitely conspiratorial minded, but not in the way that lefties are. Lefties have a different perspective on it, and these guys that I'm following on Twitter, they are part of this real small knit um, little community where they all think this way, and they're actually doing the work of actually looking into expanding upon the work that was done here in Program to Kill. And I think the media kind of reflects that, like right wing news hardly ever has, journalists out on the street doing the work. It's always, people that work for bigger leftist organizations. And then the right, like if you go look at Breitbart, well, Breitbart isn't really doing hardly any reporting. They just are an aggregate site where they're just compiling news stories that are, convenient for the right. But so in that way, I think the right and the left are different on the conspiracy spectrum. These
I
guys
think,
are,
as you said, a lot of the con inc, as it's called, catches a lot of people before they get to do any sort of right wing slanted conspiracy research, I guess.
So when I was thinking about the conclusion of this, like what's the takeaway we should think, I was thinking that, on the right complains about big government all the time. They always talking about big government, the evils of big government, but it's always contained in this very convenient Overton window where they're talking about tax rate, or they're talking about, over regulatory policies that are too invasive in the normal person's life, or we got to get the free market back online. But when you read a book like Program to Kill, you realize that the real evil of a big government is just the horrific things that intelligence has done over the last 70, 75 years, or even before then. But I mean, as far as this book goes, and MK Ultra goes, and and that sort of thing. That is the true evil. I mean, it really is horrific. And every time that I hear, well, like I was listening to Bill Whittle, he had a YouTube video called, Why the Right Loses. And they were talking about things that we should do we should run on, that we're going to win on. And one of them was, his neighbor used to have every Halloween, he had a tree house in the backyard, and he would decorate it really, really. And so kids from all over the neighborhood would come, and eventually it became so big, he started charging tickets. Like he had to buy a ticket to go in his backyard and check out his thing. But it was cool because everybody did it and it was beloved. And then one day, well, this was in California, and one day the LA city government said, hey, you can't be doing that. And they banned it. They said, hey, you're going to have to get a license to sell tickets to this, amusement park, or however we're going to classify it.
Yeah.
And so it had to shut down. It was like $80,000 to get that license. And so he had to shut it down. And so they were saying, well, this is the worst thing. If we ran against big government, well, this would be one of the things that we would dial back. But to me, I see this story. There's like on zerohedge.com, the CIA experimented on hundreds of orphans, torturing them to reveal psychopathic traits. Well, that's big government. I mean, that's really what big government is doing. Big government is, in Guantanamo Bay, stripping the prisoners naked and making them stack up in a triangle and just crazy stuff. Big government is allowing Jeffrey Epstein to run free. And this book will illuminate the horrors that the intelligence agencies have done over the last 70 years. And every time you hear somebody talk about, well, you can't put up a normal garage sale sign up anymore, you have to have the government form. Oh, isn't this terrible? You're going to have these kind of stories floating around in the back of your head.
You only knew how bad things really are. I guess
I think that's
it's the note to end on. Yeah.
I think that's actually perfectly put. But really great point you're putting forward there. I mean, we're not showing our faces here, but if you'd seen my face when you were talking about the Bill Whittle garage sale story, you just see my eyes just rolling so hard in the back of my head, and it's like it's completely zoning out just listening to the standard Con Inc. spiel. But it's always funny to laugh at the degree of sort of containment bubbles people are in. I mean, I've been posting about copium and stuff on Twitter recently as a sort of result of an event that me and the Walrus were at, where I was talking to some other right-wing people, in the sense that they're not in our spheres, but they're probably on our side of the if you divide like the political landscape in two, they would be on our side in terms of what they want to accomplish, but they're so deep in copium, right? Either from like the QAnon stuff, or like it's whether it's like Steve Turley or like Ben Shapiro. They're just, I mean, they might as well be normies in my view. But again, I don't want to spend too much time complaining about it and about this sort of like wheel spinning, completely pointless conservative battles that are being fought. But another point that you made, witticism, that I thought was great was this, like the lefties who are actually doing real journalism and are trying to continue this project. And I think that's something that that maybe we should try to think about in our spheres, and like trying to break away from just sitting and Googling stuff, or just ordering the books that Amazon are recommending to us. In a sense, like we're trying to just maybe try to do some like journalism the way they would have done it 30 years ago. Maybe we'll just go and talk to somebody, or just ask somebody, try to find some newspaper
there's
archives,
more than enough
or
people out there in our circles who have access to a lot of forbidden texts, to put it that way, and being able to propagate them in some way would be very beneficial, I think.
Yes, because the time spent, even though you might find a dead lead or something, it doesn't go anywhere. Like the time you're spending actually trying to find out stuff in the real world, quote unquote, it's more productive than sitting and like trying to dunk on Ben Shapiro on Twitter or anything like that. I mean, it's almost nothing at this point, but I'm seeing just more and more of the energy just being sucked into just doing the kind of dunking, in a sense, in the meme wars, which is something that it's I mean, it's funny it's really fun. It's a nice hobby, but it doesn't get us anywhere. I think like actually having people doing more of this, real journalism would help. So it's a
Well,
great point.
this is why grift is containment. I mean, it's just that simple. I mean, they're never gonna. They're more than happy to have Steven Crowder on YouTube or Ben Shapiro on YouTube, just talking about the things that they talk about and not actually doing the stuff that matters. So, you make a good point there.
Yeah. I don't know if we have anything more we want to cover here. If we're winding down a bit, I have a couple of chats.
Yeah, I think we could do the
saved.
chats now.
If there's any more questions about this topic we had tonight, please post them in the comments while we're discussing this. I have another $5 donation from earlier from Falling Outside the Normal Moral Constraints. I'm sorry I didn't highlight it earlier, but I didn't want to interrupt the flow of the talk here. And finally, an apology to Walrus for exposing you to the horror of the twang pop abomination Fancy Like Applebee's. Well, thank you for that. It's another one of those. Do you remember when I said that when I did the power metal stream, Lytic Path, I said that my sort of way of listening to a lot of music is very much just being off in my own bubble. And then every now and then I'll interact with sort of the mainstream version of that music, and I'll be horrified at what I find. And this was another version of that, because it sort of led me down a rabbit hole of modern country. It was, I think I posted, I'd retweeted like a meme on, let me see if I can find it real quick here.
This is the country music bell curve meme.
It's the country music bell curve, and I've long I've had for a long time a country an ear for country music. It's been part of me since my childhood, pretty much, because of my I think it's my mother was very much into country, but it was a lot of the it's a lot of the classics. It's well, I say classics. I guess that depends on your perspective, but it's stuff like Jim Reeves and the old school country stuff. And so I feel like this was just a bit of a funny meme. It's a bell curve, and it's I love country music and I love country music on both sides, and I feel like I'm on the left and the right here simultaneously. But then he posted this. I can't play it because it's probably going to hit the oh, I'm sorry, the robots are going to tag this and we're going to lose the monetization. But Walker Hayes Fancy Like, and it's got like a trap beat, like it's like hip hop, but he's like semi rapping over country about like taking girls to Applebee's or something like that, and it's just an absolute abomination of a song. And I don't know if you listen to, I mean, if you're from Kentucky witticism, I don't know if you're a country fan, but
no,
thought it was
not
Kansas,
a country fan.
no.
Yeah, I'm Kansas.
Kansas. Oh, sorry.
But there's country here too. I hear this stupid song. Somebody actually said on that video that they play this song about every 15 minutes in rotation at Applebee's, and all the Applebee's employees wants to just kill themselves. So
yeah, I would as
they're
well.
the true victims.
Yeah. But that sort of led me down a rabbit hole of modern country. So I suppose at some point we're going to have to do a country stream here and have a look at some of the classics and some of the and see what happened when it became pop, I suppose, because that is, no matter what it says on the tin, that song is a spiritual put this in a way that doesn't get us flagged. It's the concept of Evola spiritual race, and that song is definitely a different race than the race that American country usually portrays. Let's put it like that.
Yes, I mean, I commented on your Twitter thread, and I mean, I was in the United States in about 2013, being exposed to some of this music. I think one of the biggest hits at the time was Kip Moore, Beer Money. which I just hated. And like since then, I just assume that it's gone through the same retarded development that everything else has been, with Zoomers that just fuck up all kinds of culture in ways that I don't even understand is possible, right? And I assume, like, when I saw the Applebee song, it's like, yeah, country's no exception. But like with the Kip Moore, and like even before, like the Toby Keiths and a lot of the stuff that's going on is like this sort of overproduced music that's kind of appealing to the dumbest parts of white people's culture. It is like, yeah, people talk about, oh, I hate hip hop and country, and I can kind of see the parallels there, because like the commercialized country music, it's really just we need to really glorify and play up the dumbest part of like this kind of white trash culture, and with this like insanely overproduced, glossy, sound that just it has no authenticity whatsoever, and I hated it.
No, yeah.
I think Toby Keith is a psyop for the military industrial complex.
Well, I can see that.
I really think
I do like
real.
his. I do like some
we'll
of his.
Put a
his
boot
stuff,
in your
but,
ass. It's the American way.
Yep. I can see it. I can see it. I mean, we're a far shout from Patsy Cline these days. Yeah, I don't want to spend. We'll probably do a what happened to country at some point, but Nordanon says that. So you're saying that Wolver should be wearing a cowboy hat rather than a Viking helmet. I do actually own a cowboy hat. I think I have a cowboy hat that belonged to my wife's father, actually, and I think I have his boots as well. So yeah,
do you
I have
wear
actually
these out in public, or how's this
no,
work?
but a part of me, it's probably would like to do that, but it wouldn't be socially acceptable here. I would have to move
this
to
is Halloween occasion or something.
I have Halloween. My Halloween costume is a pirate costume that I bought like 7 years ago that I always just pull out because I don't want to like figure out like a Halloween costume, which it's a smaller problem now than it used to be, because Halloween isn't really a thing here in Norway. It's a thing when you're a kid, and it becomes a thing when you get old enough to drink again, because you need an excuse to drink, right? So you go to Halloween parties again. So when I was like 20, I bought a pirate costume, and that's my Halloween costume, right? So
for years, I was so broke for a long time, and for years my Halloween costume was just a piece of paper that I would put in like a see-through like plastic folder, and I'd paper clip it to my shirt, and it would say "To women from God," and that was my Halloween costume. I was going as God's gift to womankind.
I love it. That's good. Okay, let's see here. There was a couple of other things. This was in relationship to the comments we made about going on Alex Jones in a gimp suit. To play devil's advocate, if we shy away from speaking the truth because we are afraid of being labeled crazy, then the enemy will simply call any dissenters crazy to cow us into silence. And that's true, but I mean, it's about picking your targets. You're allowed to be strategic. It's fine. I don't think we have the luxury of playing against an opponent that isn't going to punish us if we just, start speaking the truth, as you say.
Yeah,
I don't
it's a
see
nice
that
little
as a
balancing
possibility.
act there, but generally, I mean, I don't. I no longer believe in the idea that we're just going to speak the truth and then you're going to win. It doesn't work that way. I mean, you might have like the best arguments.
It's a bit of a making your own luck sort of situation. It's about preparing for the moments where you can actually make a difference, and you have to be lucky to be in that situation, but you also have to be prepared so that when you're in that situation, you know how to take advantage of it, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yolnir for 750 Icelandic kroner says WikiLeaks did more damage to the deep state than any right-wing media outlet for the last 50 years. Yeah, I was going to mention someone like Assange. I don't know what his political leanings are, but I get the sense that he's more left leaning than right leaning, at least. So, okay, I think that's everything we have for tonight. We talked about some psyoping, we talked about some serial killers, and you got to know some walrus lore about my cowboy hat. So I'd call that a good good session, don't you, Luddic Path?
Yeah, it's good. I think we forgot the shill. If you don't mind,
Oh yes,
then
sorry. Of
we should
course.
probably just do that now. So
Yes.
yeah, for those of
Witticism.
you,
Tell us
witticism first.
about what you do.
Oh, I make videos every Wednesday, and I put them up here on YouTube. I also have a Telegram and a Twitter. I'm pretty active on Twitter. I post some interesting things on there. So, and it's all at Witticism TV. So that's what I got.
Sorry, I was muted. Luddic Path.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Again, follow me on Twitter. I also recommend that you try to follow the Praxarchy Twitter account because we're trying to get some new articles up there. And next week on the Longhouse, we're going to have a dissident nomad from the Praxarchy talking about the petrodollar. So I think it's going to be a very interesting episode. I keep trying to.
I'm looking forward to that one.
Trying to bring some of the knowledge from the authors on that site into our spheres a little bit more. So I think that's going to be interesting.
Mm-hmm. As for myself, I have, of course, it's this YouTube channel. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. Every week, usually on Thursday evenings, we do the show, The Longhouse. I should have my Substack linked in the description down below, which has one article called "The Fridge Theory of Politics." I don't know how often I'm going to be posting there, but if there's things that I feel don't necessarily fit to the live stream format and I'm just getting hung up on some thoughts, maybe I'll dump them there. I have my Twitter, of course. I'm almost at 500 followers, so consider giving me a follow there. We have the Element Matrix channel in the description down below. A nice little community has formed there now with people shitposting and talking about stuff pertaining to our spheres. And I see some people in chat are linking to Nordhuger's latest video. I know has been posting stuff. He's very good at doing the sort of Sumer style content, but delivering our messages. I really enjoy the stuff he makes. So if you would like, go check out Nordhuger's channel as well. And I think with that, we should call it a night. Thank you for joining us, Witticism.
Yeah,
thank you everyone
for having
watching.
me on. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Okay. Have a good night.